to another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm your host, Susie Selleck, and today we are in Cambridge City, Indiana, and I'm joined by Chad Whistler, who is a member of the Western Wayne Heritage Group. Chad, thank you so much for having us here today.
And welcome to Cambridge City.
Well, it's an honor to be here. It's a beautiful day to be here, and we are...
Awesome day to be here.
It is, right? And we are on this gorgeous property. Just let's get to it. Start telling us about it.
This property was constructed in 1840 by Benjamin Conklin. He was a pioneer settler of the Cambridge City area. He held his mercantile, and his residence was also in this building. And I think even today it serves as a statement of prosperity and pioneer settlers in the Cambridge City area.
Chad, tell us a little bit more about the beginnings of Cambridge City.
Yes, Susie. The Whitewater River was a natural break for travelers and settlers that were heading west. The first settler family arrived here in 1813. Their cabin was built along the east bank of the river that would later become part of General Solomon Meredith's farm. A grist mill and sawmill were soon in operation further up the river and now what is part of Crites Park. By the early 1830s, Ira Lackey opened the first store in East Cambridge, but with the 1836 platting and later incorporation of Cambridge City, the heart of the business district soon moved to the west side of the river.
You mentioned earlier General Solomon Meredith. Now, was this the famous Civil War general?
Yes, he is. Solomon Meredith was of Quaker descent, and he was very active in political affairs. He was known as Long Saul for his towering height of 6 foot 7 inches. In 1851, he bought the Oakland farm with its stately two-story brick home, now known as the Meredith Place, along the east side of the river. He lived there with his wife and his 3 sons until the Civil War erupted in 1861. Meredith recruited hundreds of men for a volunteer infantry. Oliver P. Morton, Indiana's governor at the time, appointed Meredith to head up the new 19th Indiana Regiment. His regiment soon joined with 3 others to become the famous Iron Brigade. We actually have General Meredith's Civil War sword, his sash, and his military commission in the history room of the Cambridge City Public Library. You might recognize one of the signatures on the bottom of it. After the war, General Meredith returned home and continued farming. Upon his death, he was first buried near Cambridge City's original cemetery, Capitol Hill, within sight of the Meredith home. But his grave and towering monument were moved several years later to the new Riverside Cemetery just north of town.
Earlier, when we were checking out the town, I noticed a commemoration for Virginia Claypool Meredith. Is this any relation to the general?
Yes, she was actually the general's daughter-in-law. She married his son, Henry Clay, and took an active role in farming with her new husband, helping to continue the cattle and sheep breeding program General Meredith had started. Following her husband's untimely death, Virginia continued managing the farm's operations, a very uncommon thing for a woman at the time. She also became very active in agricultural education and advancement. She was the first female of the Board of Trustees at Purdue University, and the state of Mississippi awarded Virginia a medal acknowledging her as the Queen of American Agriculture.
Speaking of women and very uncommon roles at the time, tell us more about the Overbeck Sisters.
Sure. In 1911, the Overbeck Sisters had established their pottery business a block off of the main street. It was started by Margaret, a college art teacher, with her sisters, Mary as the designer, Elizabeth as the potter, and Hannah helping the others. The pottery studio was also the family's home, shared with their parents, brother, and 2 sisters. In the early 1900s, women artists were fairly uncommon. To improve their chances of selling their work, some would use an assumed name or just use the first and last initial. The Overbecks actually promoted their sisterhood, although they reportedly kept the formulas for their special collars, metallics, and matte glazing a secret. They handled all aspects of the business and were best known for their fanciful figures, grotesque critters, and stylized plants and animals appearing in the Art Deco pieces. Their art is in several museum collections and has appeared even on Antiques Roadshow. Their home is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and a collection of their work can be found in the Overbeck Museum, housed inside the Cambridge City's Public Library.
It's very clear that Cambridge City appreciates history and values their art. As I was going through downtown, it looks absolutely beautiful. I saw a lot of murals. Can you talk about what's going on with those?
Yes, the murals are an ongoing effort within our county. Did you see the one in our post office? In 1941, following the Depression, we benefited from the New Deal Public Works art campaign. There is a mural inside on the wall depicting one of our community's greatest athletes. That same athlete is also painted on an outside wall across from our Bicentennial Park. Single G was a world-famous racehorse owned by William Barefoot in Cambridge City. Beginning in 1913, he raced for 14 years and took part in 434 harness racing heats, winning over half of them and placing in all but 16. He was the first pacer to win a race in which 3 consecutive heats were all placed in 2 minutes or better. This record has never been equaled or beaten since. He even survived an attempted poisoning when someone slipped him a tainted apple. He got ill and missed a few races, but was soon back winning. When he was retired, Single G was the first and only pacer to win more than $100,000 in prize money.
I was curious about Lincoln's funeral train, that mural. Can you talk about Lincoln's connection to the town?
Yes. At some point, Lincoln may have visited the home of General Solomon Meredith. But what we know for sure is the funeral train came through town on April 30th, 1865 at 4:15 a.m. in the morning. Homes and buildings were draped in mourning bunting, and an artillery gun salute marked its arrival. Despite the early hour, 3,000 townsfolk turned out to pay their respects to the president. No official stops were scheduled as the train crept along the tracks, but just outside General Meredith's home, it paused and sounded its whistle for a 5-second salute. It paused again for 15 seconds under a grand arch in the town center and briefly once more at the west end of town. This monumental event was commemorated by accomplished muralist Pam Bliss, a former student from Cambridge City's Lincoln High School.
Sounds to me like back in the day, Cambridge City was quite the happening place.
Yes, and it still is. We've been fortunate to be at the heart of many travelers' byways, going back to the original Indian paths through the territory. In 1809, the settlers bought a strip of land from the Indians, which extended the original boundary line established in 1785. Because the new boundary was 12 miles further west, the area became known as the 12-Mile Purchase. A dirt path known as the Cumberland Road came through town in 1827. It was later improved and was known as the National Road. In 1845, the Whitewater Canal was completed and offered an alternative cargo route to the Ohio River. A few years later, rail transportation arrived. We also had an interurban passenger trolley car that ran down the middle of the main street.
Chad, tell me why Cambridge City is known as a destination town.
We are in the heart of Antique Alley, and folks from near and far come to see our unique stores for treasures and enjoy our various antique festivals each year. We also have an annual winter festival with horse-drawn carriage rides, carolers, Santa, and an amazing drive-through Christmas Wonderland light display in the park. But our biggest festival is Canal Days. Held the weekend after Labor Day, the main street comes alive with booths filled with antiques, homemade goods, and great food. Highlights of the weekend include a car show, a parade, and the famous duck race.
Chad, I'm still waiting to hear about this haunted roadside inn.
Sure. Back in the mid-1800s, Cambridge City housed several inns and motels to house weary travelers. These travelers were arriving by road, rail, or canal boat. 2 of these establishments are now prominent landmarks in the area. The Vinton House Hotel sat at the edge of the National Road, or US 40, and the Whitewater Canal brought guests and cargo to its rear entrance. The 36-room hotel included a ballroom, fine dining, and a basement pub. Today it houses an antique store on the first 2 floors and a history exhibit on the 3rd level. Also, perched on the National Road at the western edge of town is the 1841 Huddleston Farmhouse Inn. John Huddleston, his wife, and their 11 children would regularly provide overnight shelter for westward travelers and their animals. Tour guides have reported mysterious events, including rocking chairs moving on their own and items being found out of place. The house and property now serve as a interpretive center for the old National Road and is open for tours.
Thank you for watching another episode of History in Your Own Backyard. I'm your host, Susie Selleck. Today I was here with Chad Whistler here in Cambridge City, Indiana. Chad, thanks again for having us.
Thank you, Susie.
And remember, travel slowly and stop often. Bye for now.